Hello everybody, Walter here. Welcome to episode 21 of my Let's Play series for Satisfactory 1.0. In the last episode we finally got around to providing the raw materials to our refineries, and today I would like to get started on further processing the now available metal ingots into more useful stuff. But before we can begin with that, there is a little bit of preliminary work to do. So with that in mind, let's quickly jump back into the game and have a quick look where we left off last time. And here we are. So, first things first, let's make our way over to the logistics center here, as I somehow got a little bit confused during the last episode and mixed up the splitter and merger here. So, first let's remove the splitter, then replace it with the merger, and then replace the merger with the splitter. And then I can put in the belts again, and now, at least once I have the Mark 6 belts in place, all of the refineries on top should run at full capacity. Or at least they will once I deal with the outputs, because while some are still filling up, the majority of those here have already completely filled up and are waiting for me to do something about it. Which is pretty much next on the agenda, because currently all of those outputs end up over here on the side of the foundation, where you might be able to see all of those signs here. And that is actually a bit far from where they will be needed, which is over there. So the next step is just bringing all of these here down to this row. And while I'm working on that, I might as well put in a proper flow in this general area here. And just like this here. On a side note, while I was working on those conveyors here, I had an idea and started rewiring some of the power wire. So this power wire here is now what feeds into all of these refineries. And the power wire over there is what feeds into all of the miners as well. And that is the reason I had to split those two here all the way over there into my steel facility. So I can easily control at least the refinement without turning off anything else. So, next up on the agenda is the actual factory for today, which will be an 18 by 32 foundations in size. So, let's get started with planning that out. And I'm honestly worrying a little bit about this rock there. It might be in the way, so let's get that checked. So, I think if I start here, that should... come on. Okay, should work pretty nicely. So let's start with 8 and then another 10 for the 18. Then we should very quickly be able to see if the rock is in the way. Yep, it's a little bit in the way. But that shouldn't be an issue, as there is a gap right there in the... or I can move a gap into this position inside of the factory. So yeah, that should work. Depending on how that wiggles out. But let's continue. So I need 32, so that's 2. 12. And that is 22. And that's 32. Let's see. I will have to go over this rock there, so I think I'll have to work on this height level here. Okay, good. That should work. Although, let's just check. Okay, I shouldn't run into any issues with this cliff over there, so yeah, that should work. So, now, next step is putting in the rest of this foundation here, as well as redirecting this power wire and the conveyor all the way to the back there, so I'm not getting into any issues when I'm building. And here we go, and the foundation is now in place, together with a raised outer border, which should give me enough space to deal with any kind of conveyor spaghetti and also make sure everything is at the proper height. I've also already included the conveyor walls for mostly steel over here and the refined materials, as well as a temporary dimensional depot to get some more quartz crystals, since the blueprints I'm using need a lot of that, as I went a little bit wild with the science for decoration. And with that said, let's actually grab the first of these, which is this double constructor. Just need to make sure this is properly positioned. And yeah, the way this works is I have a splitter here, which deals with both, and then both run into this merger here on the other side, and then I can just chain all of this together. And if I were to grab another of those modules here, I can interconnect them very simply below the floor with some belts between the splitters and mergers. And at the top here for power, all I need to do is connect these two outlets here, and this one here is already connected to this one on the other side, so this is now chained properly already. And I might want to actually give this some proper power, so I can use my hover pack in the vicinity. So that's the general idea. Now for this row here, all of these will produce steel pipes, and with a full 60 constructors, this means I'm using 1800 steel, or in other words 4 of those conveyors here, to produce 1200 or one full Mark 6 belt of steel pipes. So with that in mind, let's get the rest of these modules in place and properly connected to these conveyors over here. And the first row is done. Now, in case you're curious how I handle the 4 input belts, it's pretty simple. The first belt feeds directly into the first 7 modules. The last of those is fed via a smart splitter, and then we have 30 or half a module worth of steel ingots overflowing into the merger here, which merges with the second belt, which has just enough space left for, well, the 30. And then it feeds into the 8 following modules, which brings us to the middle point, and then I have just a carbon copy basically of that using the 3rd and 4th belt. And the rest is just chained together, as I already showed you. Now with that handled, it's time for the outside parts. So let's get started by adding the T-junctions here. And then the intersections in those corners. Then I am going to need, let's actually grab that sign here for a moment. And move that in position. Then I just need to put this here a little bit further down. So that is the correct spacing. Now I'm going to quickly copy the settings. I have to do this now before I put in the barriers, because once those are in place, I can't access the signs anymore. So that's the floor basically done. Now for the sides I have again a couple blueprints. So we need first of all the wall number 1, which goes right here, and that is already perfectly spaced. So all I need to do is maybe rotate this around, I guess. Yeah, I'm going to rotate this a little bit around. Yeah, looks good. So that's the front and also the back. And then we have the wall number 2, which is meant to go on this side here. And again, I just need to make sure this is properly aligned. Like so. And yeah, this is just a simple repeating pattern. I continue until I reach the end over there. And yeah, I might want to actually do a little modification in this corner here, but only there. So then let's grab that, put it in the spot. And that looks good. Okay, and over here, that is correct. Yep, that looks all very good indeed. Yeah, now next step is just continuing until I have the outer wall, and then we're going to worry about the second row. And while I was working on that, I also decided to color code all of these here for better separation from the other rows. And with that, it's time for at least the start of the next row, which will be just 12 modules for the moment. Don't worry, there will be more, but for Right now we only need 12 modules. And in these modules are actually a little bit of a special case since they produce some high tier stuff actually. And that is copper powder. And as I can see, 32.5, yeah, that is going to need a lot of copper and is pretty much the reason this whole refinery setup here is as big as it is, since it needs 6 full Mark 6 belts worth of copper. So the vast majority of the copper is just going in here, and those 6 belts will be translated into 1 full belt of the copper powder. But besides of that, the entire approach is the same as before, so I just need to chain them, and obviously I need to split them into corresponding submodules, each fed with its own belt. And now with the copper powder handled, it's time for the last 2 belts worth of steel ingots. So let's grab a constructor module. I need a 2 white space, and then first 3 modules for steel pipes, and then another 6 modules for steel beams, which altogether should be just enough to handle the 2 belts. And yeah, this part here in the middle, I'll just put in a simple floor and nothing really fancy beyond that. Just like in this here. And now it's time for the end of this row, which are 5 modules that will process a full Mark 6 belt worth of raw SAM ore and turn it into 300 animated SAM or reanimated SAM per minute. And with that, the second row is done, and it's time for the third row, which will be completely full again without any gaps, and this time I will only produce copper wire, although the last 2 modules will be slightly underclocked to 50% since I only really need 58 constructors worth of copper wire and not a full 60. For that I'm going to need about half of the copper from this belt and all of the copper from this belt at the back there. And that finishes another row, so it's now time for the second to last one. Now I am currently running a bit low on the iron plates, but this row will actually produce iron plates among other things, so that should be a self-correcting problem. So what am I going to start with? Well, I'm going to start with, let's check, okay, it's the right way around, 4 modules for iron rods. The last module will be underclocked again to 50%. Then I need another 2 white gap. And then I would need 20 modules for iron plates. Now I am very low on those, so let's quickly go to the other side. Since over here I need at the very end another 2 modules that take some of the produced wire to turn it into cable. One of these is again underclocked. And then I have another 2 white gap, and that is the other side of these 20 modules for the iron plates. So now let's see how many can I fit in here. And that's about all I can build right now. So let's connect all of these. And then I just need to wait until a little bit of iron plates have been produced, and then I can fit in the missing components. So that worked out quite nicely, but now I'm also running out of reinforced iron plates, so it's high time to get to the last row, which will actually rectify that specific problem. So for this I'm going to need the basic assembler times 4, which are actually 8 assemblers. And then I just need to move this into the correct spot. Yep, that looks good. And a sort of a leg spike, that worked out perfectly. And the second module. So those are now 16 assemblers, and each of those will be set to the stitched iron plates, which will use up some of the iron plates from the row before and some of the copper wire from the row before that one. And well, the rest is pretty much the same idea as before, although I'm going to need the wall number 3, which is a little bit longer, since, well, the assemblers are also a bit longer. But aside of that, all of this here works just as before. And once I have these in place, I can also start closing off this side here and make my way over to this corner over there. And a bit later we are almost done with the factory now. All that's left is this corner over here. But before I start on that, I need an alternate recipe. And while I'm here, I might as well grab a couple other recipes that I'm specifically not going to use, since they are not really worth it in my opinion. So I can start researching again. So, and we already have the one I'm actually looking for, which is the fused quick-wire, which replaces some of the deuterium with copper to get more quick-wire out of that. Very, very useful. Now, let's get through that. So, let's for now concentrate on all of the ingots. So, compacted steel ingot. Why would you want to use the compacted coal? Okay, it might be a byproduct of your rocket fuel production, but aside of that, it's a waste of, well, pretty much everything you can think of that is part of it. So, copper and sulfur. It makes no sense in my opinion. Similarly, tempered copper ingot. Adding coal? Why? Coal has so many uses in the late game, it doesn't make sense to use it for just simple ingots. Similarly, why would you want to use oil? No sense at all. Doesn't make sense. Unless you start optimizing and min-maxing, then it might make, well, play a role, but you're far from that, so it doesn't make any sense. Let's see. Similarly, quartz purification. It is relatively efficient to get silica and quartz crystals, but the ratios are fixed and usually we end up with different ratios, so it also doesn't really make much sense to go that way. And let's continue. We have fused quartz crystals. Again, why add coal? Doesn't make any sense in my opinion. So, basic iron ingot. Okay, adding limestone might be a good idea. That might actually be an option, although I think the pure recipe is actually more efficient than this one. Although this one can be done in the foundry and you don't need the refinery, so, and no water, so it might be a good idea actually. If you don't want to deal with all of that. Iron alloy ingot, also a good idea if you are in the early game, but at this point it's not really alternative anymore. Leach copper ingot, why would you want to use sulfuric acid and with that sulfur? Again, doesn't make any sense in my opinion. So, and I think we're almost through with this. Leached iron ingot, again, doesn't make any sense. And we are at the bottom already. Let's see. Yeah, biocoal. It's not really useful in my opinion, so yeah. And with that, we can start with the next research, just so we are not wasting our time. Okay, so now we have the fused quick-wire, which means that we can now turn the rest of our copper that we are not yet using over here, plus the deuterium at the back there, and turn it into a bit more than 1 Mark 6 belt worth of quick-wire. And here we go. The factory is now mostly done. The main thing still missing is collecting all of the various outputs, plus some of the leftover materials that come into the factory at some spot on the outside, or even multiple spots. But as I'm not entirely sure yet where I'm going to build my following factory lines, I will have to wait until my plans have advanced a bit more with that. Now, sadly, all of this here took way longer than I had planned for, so I'm actually running out of recording time, so this episode will be a little bit shorter, or quite a bit shorter than the previous ones. One last thing I would like to do, though, is putting down a way to get over those conveyors here, maybe along this ledge, so I can reach this spot down there, and maybe even up to this walkway here and the walkway up there, but that will likely be just a few ladders, or maybe a small staircase. I'll have to check that out in a moment. And yeah, this one here still needs its entrance, so that are the last few things I'm going to do today, I guess. And voila, so now I have a proper walkway all the way to the other side of the conveyors here. And even up, and then even further up. Additionally, I have now my entrance in this spot here, directly next to the main power switch. And another main power switch was added at the top, right here. Both are fully functional and already properly integrated into the power grid. And yeah, as I said, with that we have unfortunately reached the end of this recording session here. And in the next episode, subsequently, we will have to work on, likely, the main train station. Somewhere over there, I suspect. And maybe even one more factory line, but we'll have to see how that turns out. And that brings us to the actual end of this episode here. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share and comment. It really helps the algorithm. Independent of that, I wish you a nice day. And well, see you.